My name's Tom Wiles and I'm Secretary of the Battle of Stamford Bridge Society. This year, 2016, marks a notable year in British history, but particularly for Stamford Bridge because it's the 905th anniversary of the battle that took place here, where a huge battle where basically the Vikings met the Saxons and the Saxons won, only to lose 3 weeks later at Hastings when the Normans won. So to mark this anniversary, we've embarked on a tapestry project which links the Bayeux Tapestry and the Fulford Tapestry, which depicts the other two battles either side of Stamford Bridge. Stamford Bridge was the middle battle, and we have about 20 to 30 people working at the moment with great enthusiasm. It's an idea we had about a year ago. We put it all together and now we're working flat out to produce our own tapestry depicting the story of the battle. And we want to make sure that it does tell the true story of Stamford Bridge and put the records right, because Stamford Bridge, like Fulford, are the forgotten battles of 1066. Hastings is remembered because it's always the winners that write the history, and William won at Hastings and he wrote the history of 1066. The tapestry, we've decided, consists of initially 12 panels, each 1 metre long. Myself and Chris Rock, who's the chair of the society, got together and decided how we're going to depict the story to get as much story as possible, but without being too short. So 12 metres was as concise as we could get it. So we came up with a storyboard. Each panel has its own story, from when Harold Hardrada and Tostig went to York after the Battle of Fulford. It ends, of course, with the death of Harold Hardrada. We base it on the Bayeux Tapestry. We're not copying the Bayeux Tapestry. We're actually doing it in the style and the spirit of the Bayeux Tapestry. So it's the same size and same scale, and it looks very much like it.
The problem with the Bayeux Tapestry is we haven't got any representations of the Vikings or the Scandinavians or the Northmen. We've got obviously the Saxons and the Normans, and that's great for researching and using some information from the Saxon side. So I've had to adapt the imagery from Bayeux into a more Scandinavian style. Obviously the clothing they're wearing, although very similar, even at the time the weapons and the armour was pretty similar throughout the whole of Europe, there would have been little differences. So although it was a hot late summer's day, we knew they were lightly armoured and lightly clothed, probably, so I've had to reflect that in some of the drawings. When you do look at the Bayeux Tapestry, what the artist or the artists then captured, they captured certain reflexes or certain, like, the way the horses looked, the way that the saddles worked, the way the bridles worked, the way they held the shields or the way they used the spears. And the more you look at it, the more detail you get from it.
My name is Shirley Smith and I'm a professional embroiderer. I was asked to come down initially to have a look at what was going on, and it became evident that someone was needed to sort of lead the stitching side of the project. So I volunteered to do that. I take over when Tom produces the drawing, and the drawing is then transferred onto white cotton, which is fastened onto a wooden frame. We then stretch another layer of fabric on the frame, and we then have the problem of getting the image through onto the right side. And this is done by turning the frame over and stitching through the drawn design on the back. We use just a running stitch in a fine cotton, and we use the colour which we think we're going to use for the outlining. When that's done, we turn the frame over and work from the top, and we use the first of just 2 stitches, an outline stitch, very similar to a stem stitch, but work the other way around. The design is then filled in with what is known as Bayeux stitch. This was the stitch used originally on the Bayeux Tapestry. This is a laid stitch which fills in big areas quickly and economically with the thread. The colours we chose are as similar as we could get them to match the colours that are used on the original Bayeux Tapestry. 8 of them in the main, with 2 extra highlighting colours for the regal characters. Most of the stitching is very straightforward. I think the part that people find the most difficult is the characters that have chainmail. It's quite difficult to depict that in lots of tiny circles, but we've worked out several ways of doing it, so there is a variety.
The Bayeux Tapestry is a great artistic piece, but it's also some propaganda for the Normans to tell their side of the story. So in a way, what I'm trying to do with our story is introduce elements which we can relate to in Stamford Bridge. So for example, when the invaders get to Stamford Bridge, I've depicted them as doing a bit of hunting, because they've obviously walked 12 miles on a hot day. They'll be thirsty, they'll be hungry. This guy's decided to lay a line out, try and catch maybe a salmon or a fish. This guy's got a duck. This guy's just about to shoot an arrow into one of the ducks. So it's bringing these little elements that exist in Stamford Bridge now, because obviously there's ducks there now. I would have thought 1,000 years ago there would have been ducks on the pond then. And that's the way to look at history, I think, is to see them as humans and not just pages in a book.
Since starting the tapestry on the end of September last year, 2015, we've now moved on so well that we've got 6 panels, half the tapestry on the go at the moment. The first panel is actually complete in terms of the storyline. We still have the borders top and bottom to go on, plus the text. The others are coming on various stages at the moment, but the idea is we may have them finished by September, anniversary of the battle. There's no rush in this. We don't want to rush and make sure it's done properly, but we'll certainly have a lot to show at the anniversary of September. The first panel depicts the end of the Battle of Fulford, where Harold and Tostig go to York to demand they bring hostages to Stamford Bridge. And then it goes back in time, where you see King Harold Godwinson on the throne in London, and he hears the messages that the Vikings have actually landed on the east coast of Britain and sacked and burned Scarborough. So this is about a week before the Battle of Fulford. The end of the first panel is him sending messages out to gather his army to come to Stamford Bridge.
Well, basically, the whole tapestry depicts that one day's battle in 1066. The first panels really are introducing our characters of Godwinson, Hardrada, and Tostig. We've got basically the end of the Fulford battle. Ours takes over from that point onwards. Tostig, Godwinson go into York and they demand hostages, and then the hostages are obviously told to be at Stamford Bridge in 5 days' time, which is where the premise of the whole reason for the battle taking place at Stamford Bridge comes from. The panel 3 is the arriving at Stamford Bridge, awaiting for the hostages. They've come on a hot day, lightly armoured, with light weapons, not expecting no trouble. Of course, they don't realise that by the 25th, Harold Godwinson, the King of the English, had arrived in York, and he goes straight out to meet them in battle. Harold Hardrada, the Viking king, only took 2/3 of his army to Stamford Bridge. He left 1/3 back at Rickle in camp. So he's undermanned, he's lightly armoured, and he's caught off guard. And by panel 5, really the battle's starting. The meeting on the riverbanks, the fighting over the bridge. We have the giant on the bridge defending it. He supposedly held back the English army for 2 or 3 hours, killed 30-40 Saxons single-handedly, whilst his army formed up on the east bank. And eventually one English guy got in a tub under the bridge, got his spear and took the guy down from below. And then obviously from panel 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, it's really the main focus of the battle taking place on the west bank with the shield wall and with that horrible slaughter of thousands of men hacking each other to pieces. And that's really where the panels from 8, 9, 10, 11 go into the detail, with the deaths of Hardrada, the death of Tostig, and then the Vikings fleeing for their lives back to camp at Rickle, and then eventually back home. They came in 250 ships, and they went back home in about 24, 25 ships. So that's really where our story ends. Harold Godwinson great victory for the Saxons, for the English, end of the Viking Age in Britain. He goes back to York, celebrates, but within 2 or 3 days he's told of the Normans arriving at Pevensey on the south coast. Our story ends on Harold leaving York to go down south to fight the Normans at Hastings.
Today we have been here at the village hall where we were privileged to welcome the Archbishop of York, Dr. John Sentamu, and he has also shown a lot of interest in the tapestries. We went to the new inn in the village to meet Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall when they visited the village, mainly, it has to be said, because of the flooding at Christmas, but they were both exceptionally interested in our panels and have asked to be kept informed, so we thought we might send them some up-to-date photos.
After starting in September 2015, we're now in May 2018, and we've got to the end of phase 1, which is the central narrative of the panels. There are little bits being redone at the moment. We did have the text in the panels originally, and having decided to put the text in the borders at the top, we've now had to go through with designer and add a whole load of ducks and arrows and tops of buildings. But basically, phase 1 is done now, which is the central narrative, and now we're moving on to the borders. The top border will be entirely lettering. Giving the entire border over to the lettering means that we can put a lot more detail in. And the bottom border is going to have scenes from life at the time, flanked by smaller images and the names of the sewers in runes. We also have the design now for the introductory panel, which is going to feature the 2 kings and Tostig in their colours that you can follow them all the way through the tapestry, and a whole load of information about how the battle came about and why they were involved in the story. We've got a lot of individual pieces being worked. If people aren't working on the panels, then they're working on individual designs from the panels, which we can then sell to raise money, because we're entirely self-financed. We're a volunteer group. We have 2 panels to go at the end which haven't been designed quite yet. One of them is going to be a sort of stitched crowd photo with Tom in the middle and all the stitchers and anybody important who has come to see the tapestry, like Prince Charles and Camilla, Archbishop Sentamu, people like that. This one behind me shows the bridge in Stamford Bridge and the parley at the beginning of the battle, when Harold Hardrada and Tostig rode over the bridge to meet Harold Godwinson, the English leader, to ask for him to give them England, basically. And he looked up and down at Harold Hardrada and said, "So how tall are you? 6 feet, 7 feet? You can have 6 feet of English earth and bury yourself in it," which is where the battle started. The bridge was also the scene of one of the most famous parts of the battle, where a berserker who was a massive, muscly Viking, they were the tank corps of the Viking army. They were called berserkers because they wore bear fur around their shoulders, and berserker means bear fur shirt. He was on the bridge stopping everybody getting across, and legend has it that one of the English soldiers floated underneath him in half a barrel, balanced with his spear, and then went like that. And that was the end of the berserker on the bridge. So we think there's probably about another 18 months' work to do before it's finished, but as Tom always said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's finished when we think it's finished. And then we're hoping for it to have a permanent home where it can be displayed, but that's rather up in the air at the moment.